Good afternoon and welcome to She Matters. It's wonderful to have you with us today in the studio. And I have a very exciting guest with me today who I know you are going to really enjoy. Please meet Linda Heron. Welcome to the show, Linda.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. It's wonderful to be here with you today.
Thank you so much for coming. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have a fantastic afternoon together. Our theme today is from kissogram to Christ. I think that's self-explanatory in itself. If you don't know what a kissogram is, it's like a strippogram. Am I allowed to say that? Anyway, you get paid to go and deliver a kiss, and our theme is from kissogram to Christ. So you're going to hear more about that as we go through the show. But I want to remind you, please send us your emails and your text and be part of the program today, okay? Thank you. Linda.
Yes, Yvonne.
Welcome to She Matters.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. Now, just tell the viewers a little bit about yourself.
Okay, first of all, I just want to say, rather than strippogram, many years ago there was such a thing as a telegram before emails and Facebook and Twitter.
Of course.
And so it evolved from that, really, where you'd send someone a surprise on their birthday and it would be a kissogram, which was a girl dressed up in a basque and suspenders and would be a surprise at the party. So that's where the kissogram started, and over the years I know they've evolved into stripograms and so forth.
Okay.
So that explains that title.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Okay, I'm Linda Heron, and at the moment I'm at Elim Christian Centre in Northampton. And if I go back to the kissogram bit, before I was a Christian, as a part-time job, I worked in the travel agents, and as a part-time job, I took the kissogram job.
Oh.
And that was going around the parties and going around the nightclubs of Blackpool. And actually, it was quite exciting. You see, whenever you got invited, you were the centre of the party. And so people spoilt you and they welcomed you in their homes or where they had their events. And so I loved doing them. And then one day we got this invitation in the office to come and do a kissogram at a local church. Now, I always took a gorilla with me because a gorilla keeps you safe. It's not a real gorilla.
Oh, good.
So you have this guy dressed up in the gorilla suit, and then he goes along and he chaperones you, so to speak. And so as we would go into all these different places, and we'd just enjoy ourselves and have a ball and very welcomed. And so this invitation came into the church, and the gorilla guy, he was a bit apprehensive about this. And I said, no. I said, I've heard about churches, you know. Churches are great places to be. And so I said, they're going to look after us, they're going to welcome us, it's going to be just fine. So his nerves were abated, and off we went. And we had a few other places to go to that evening. And it was a Sunday evening in Blackpool. And we did the parties, we did the clubs. Then we came to do the church. And we'd had such a good run that night, so we had nothing to worry about. And as usual, you go in through the back door because you're a secret. You're going to be a surprise for someone. Yeah. And we're waiting in the wings of the stage, and everyone's there singing their songs. And I'd never been to church before. You know, I'd been to church for what they call hatches, matches, dispatches, you know, for the
So you didn't go to Sunday school with your grandma then?
Actually, I did go to Sunday school while my mum and dad went next door to the pub. And I love Sunday school, but I didn't see Sunday school as church.
Right.
So the only time we went to church is when we got dressed up proper, and it was for a wedding or for a christening or maybe for a funeral.
Yeah.
So this was going to be a new, exciting time for me to go to a church service. And so I'm waiting in the wings, and I can hear the people singing, and it does feel a good place to be. And then I get my cue. And so I start to walk out on the stage, and I've got a mac on, so no one knows exactly what I'm about to do. And this guy's at this pulpit thing, because I didn't know what it was, and he's preaching his message. Again, I didn't know he was preaching, he was just talking. And I know that it's my cue to go and interrupt what he's doing and to give him this kiss. So I go into my routine, and I walk across this big stage, and it goes quiet. And the guy stops talking, and he holds on to his pulpit, and he looks at me. And I smile. I've got my big red lips ready to give him a kiss. And as I get closer, I whip off my coat, and there I've got my fishnet stockings, my high-heeled shoes, and my basque and suspenders. And I just plant him a big red kiss on his face. And the guy is horrified. He's frozen to his pulpit. And I'm just thinking, well, this is my job. This is what I do. He should be enjoying this bit. And instead of the crowd, lapping it up and saying hooray and, you know, happy birthday, whatever the occasion was, the lights went out.
Wow.
It went pitch black all over the place. And then I felt this blanket come over my head and I was covered. And then I felt these arms grab me and I was hustled all the way back of the stage until I came to the edge of the stage and back to the back door. And then the door was opened and I was pushed out of the door. And as I was pushed out the door, they said to me, "Your kind are not welcome here." And then I heard the band strike up and they started to pray the devil out the church and the pray against their visitor they'd just had. And as I fell out the back door, I actually tripped up and I fell into the gutter.
Oh, wow.
And as I was kneeling in the gutter, my fishneck stockings were all ripped and my knee was grazed and all sort of bloody. And I could hear them all singing and praying against me, really. And the echo through my ears then was, "Your kind are not welcome here." And as I looked down and at my sort of half-naked body, I thought, you know what? I agree with them. In what I'm dressed in, I agree with them. What was I thinking going to church dressed like this? And so from that point on, I just brushed myself down, and it was
Did
my
they throw your
part-time
coat out
job.
with you?
Everything got thrown out the gorilla and stuff like that. And so he consoled me and off we drove to our next event. And of course the next event was a party. And we were welcomed there, you know, and I'd had a bad experience at this church, yet I got to this party where the drinks and the drugs were flowing and I was welcomed. And it doesn't take long to realise where you fit.
Yes.
Where you should be in life. And I fitted in the parties. I fitted where the drugs were and the drinks were flowing. I fitted in my what I was doing, my kissogram outfit. The people there loved me, they embraced me. And in some sort of way, they respected me.
Wow.
And they looked after me. And that's where I decided I fit.
Well, as I'm listening to you, I'm having, like, not great trauma, but I'm wrestling with myself because I'm remembering Jesus actually spending time mostly with sinners.
Yes.
And actually shunning the religious people.
Yes.
And I'm also thinking, if that had been our church that you had come into, would we have behaved any differently?
Yes.
And yet, your kind, as you were then, that's the very place that you needed to be.
Yes. I mean, someone said a comment to me this morning, which was quite intriguing, that, "Oh, you're the girl that came in and kissed the preacher." And I said, "Yes, and I'm still kissing preachers today." But I mean my husband. You see, my life has changed now, and of course I'm a pastor's wife, and I'm in church regularly. But I do have to ask myself a question: what would I do if someone dressed as a kissogram approached my husband when he was in mid-flow of preaching? What would I do? And I think it's only because of my own personal experience, perhaps I would have a bit more grace and I'd be a bit more pleasant about the whole occasion. But without that experience, as Christians, and we're in the middle of doing church, this was a church service.
Yeah.
This was in the middle of the Word of God being preached. How disgraceful is that?
Yeah, we could take that attitude, and I guess a lot of people will and do, but it's really making me think, maybe if I didn't know you and didn't hear your story, I would have had a completely different outlook.
Yes.
But knowing you and the grace that's on your life, I'm thinking the church is there to be relevant.
Yes.
And how relevant are we when we throw out people who obviously need a saviour?
Yeah.
How relevant are we when our service is more important than saving a life?
Yes.
How relevant are we?
No, I think we forget sometimes as we go to church often, I think we forget that there are people out there that they're not used to church. They're not used to church services. Maybe they've never been into church, or maybe just like me, they'd only been for certain ceremonies of the family, or so to speak. And so we do forget that there are people that may come through our doors at times that just aren't used to the way we do church. And their language or their dress, it might not be as we would like it to be as Christians. But that is what we're there for. We're there to embrace everyone from all sorts of walks of life. And sometimes I think we do expect our fish to come to us clean.
And somebody else said you can't you know, scale the fish until you've caught it.
Exactly, exactly. So from that point on, that was probably about 7 years before I actually went into a church again.
Wow.
And
so was that because you felt traumatised, or did you feel embarrassed or ashamed, or
I
what
don't
was
think,
it?
at the time, I wouldn't have thought I was traumatised. I actually thought I deserved to be treated like that.
Okay.
So I thought, well, that's fine. Just don't go there again. Keep away from places like that. You know where you belong, Linda.
Yes.
And you don't belong in places like church. That's where the clean people go.
But whose voice was that? Whose voice was telling you that you didn't belong there?
Well, it came out of my experience, but of course, my experience was unusual. And I don't blame the people of that church at all. But it was just my personal experience, and it helps us to realise what can go on in people's minds and hearts when we are abrupt with them, or perhaps when we aren't sensitive to where they're at in life and where we've come along the journey, because it's by grace for all of us.
Because, you know, we want to experience mercy and
We do,
forgiveness,
and we
but
need
we're
it.
not always so generous in handing it out to others.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
that's amazing about human beings, that we're like that.
So over the next few years, I decided I was going to live life to the full. So I worked very hard in my job as a travel agent, but in the evenings I also played very hard. I still did the kissograms part-time to earn some extra money, and I went to parties and nightclubs, and I thought I was enjoying life. I would get involved in drugs. Every week I would take drugs of one form or another, maybe cocaine or ecstasy, and this was a regular occurrence, maybe 2 or 3 times a week.
Wow.
But I kept down my job. Something in me was sensible.
Yes.
So if I'd been out all night, then I'd just take some drugs to keep awake and do my job all through the day. And I lived life like that. I would think nothing of going all the way from Blackpool down to London for a night out just to get in the clubs there.
Wow.
And going abroad, and we would just be on drugs all the time we went away. So that was my life.
So you really lived hard.
Well, yes, but at the time, with the people I was mixing with, it was normal. All my friends lived like I lived, apart from my work colleagues. Perhaps they were different. But the people that I rubbed shoulders with were in the boat with me, and we had something in common. And we would never think we're addicts. Not at all. We just thought this was part of enhancing our lifestyle, and it was a part of the lifestyle. In fact, I couldn't go to a nightclub without taking perhaps a line of coke or some speed or something like that. So it was a regular part of my life.
And you did that, you said, for 7 years. So
Yes.
what changed? What happened?
Well, in between those 7 years, I also repped as a 18 to 30s rep in Magaluf in the 80s. And anyone that's my age will remember that was not a good place to be in the 80s.
Okay.
There was a lot of fighting, a lot of drug abuse, and I worked there. And I thought I was enjoying that. I met a DJ and married a DJ in one of the nightclubs. I didn't know him very well. Came
Did you
back
say
to
you
England.
married him?
Yes, I married him. It was a
Okay, I
quick
thought that's what you said.
whirlwind romance.
Uh-huh.
You know, these holiday romances, girls, be careful. And we came back to England, and it wasn't working out. But by then I was pregnant, and I always wanted to be part of a family. And I was determined that if ever I was going to get married, it would only be for the once. But this desperately wasn't working. So a few years later, I'm divorced. I was only married for a couple of years. Divorced and now a single mum. But I'm also working full time. So my job gave me a nanny to live in. Now this gave me freedom to keep going out to the nightclubs.
Oh.
Now, Yvonne, I was a mum, and I was going out every weekend and doing drugs.
Wow.
And I'd come in at night and I'd look over the cot at my little boy, my little baby, and the guilt would overwhelm me, and the shame. Yet I couldn't stop. Yet I wasn't an addict. It was just my lifestyle, that's what I would say.
Yes.
And that was life. I was mixing with the rich people, with famous people. It was, I suppose, a high life. Being in the travel agents, I went abroad quite often, 6 to 8 times a year. And of course, I had the freedom to do what I wanted because someone looked after my little boy.
Yes.
And that's how it was for 7 years. But then one night, in